The idea that I've been thinking about today stems around this quote from Tim Urban's book, which I have told you that I'm reading right now, What's Our Problem? And the quote is this: that's why perhaps the most important skill of a skilled thinker is knowing when to trust. And I thought about this a little bit, and Tim goes into more detail in the book. But essentially, what he's saying there is, as a thinker, and realistically, as anyone who is creating anything, writing about anything, making videos about anything, talking about anything as a person, really, one of the most important skills that you can develop is to know when to trust. And we can take that a bit away from general trust. So trusting people to not rob you, trusting people to not, murder you or something or hurt you. But we can sort of dig down a bit further in this particular topic on trusting information sources. And the reason it's so important is because you'll have heard people say, do your own research, go and figure it out yourself, do your own research in an argument. And that's just not possible. We don't have the time for that. You cannot, especially because a lot of the time you will talk about various topics from various different areas of life. Perhaps if you picked one very, very specific topic, you could do your own research, but you'd have to spend your life doing it to only rely on your own experienced outcomes. So we have to rely on other people to use their work as a basis to form our opinions on, and use to, say, if we're writing a book, to reference in our books. And the question then becomes, how do we know who we can trust and who we can't trust? I think a lot of this comes from experience with a particular source. So if you find someone, let's say use Andrew Huberman as an example. Andrew Huberman does these fantastic videos on YouTube. He's become extremely famous now, and they're just full of data and full of science. At the beginning, you can do a bit of your own research on him. You can look into whether other people trust him. You can look and see how much criticism there is of him on the internet. You can follow some of the protocols that he suggests. Try them out for yourself and see if they work for you, and see if they're kind of valid or not. So you do that at the beginning, and you probably, the next time, say he makes one video, you can test stuff out, and then the next video you don't need to test out as much, and then the next video you trust him by then, and you will then continue trusting him as a source for probably a certain amount of time. And you should go back and review whether he is still a reliable source. And this happens a lot of the time there are a lot of people, say, I don't know, I would say even Joe Rogan to an extent. Joe Rogan, at times, I mean, at least when I was younger, I would live on his every word. But as I've gotten older, I've realised that, he's just a guy with an opinion at the end of the day. And I've noticed that nowadays I disagree with him way more. And that doesn't make me like him any less. That just makes me appreciate him for what he is. He's a guy talking about things in a funny way and has a really interesting podcast with really interesting guests. But I can't just trust him as like a really reliable information source, because he's not got the time to go out of his way to research everything. In some ways, as an individual, or say as a creator, especially, I mentioned before, writer, video maker, whatever, but even as just a functioning individual in the world, you have to build up these trust networks where in some ways you see a name and you can just say, okay, I trust that person, I'll read what they have to say, and I will not have my skeptical mind turned on for too much of the time that I'm consuming their work, because that's really energy consuming. It's tiring. It's not really fun when you're being super skeptical when you're reading something. And I thought about it in terms of institutions, because in the past what we would do is that we would trust an institution. So let's say you would say the New York Times is a reliable newspaper. The Telegraph, the Times, whatever, the Guardian, that is a reliable newspaper to me. I trust the opinions of the people who write there, because the process in hiring those writers is really strict and they're really careful about fact checking and so on and so forth. Nowadays, so that made it a bit easier, because you just say, yeah, okay, they're a New York Times writer, they're a Guardian writer, I trust them, I'll read their work, and I'll turn off my barrier a bit. nowadays I don't think we can trust institutions as much, and I think we have to be more selective and actually select people on an individual basis, and that works a bit better. I mean, because you do find that there are a lot of weird, stupid, like nonsensical articles, biased articles that come out in these newspapers and in these magazines, and you just think to yourself, how on earth did that get accepted as a piece of, you know, respected journalism? Because respected in the sense of the editor's gone, yeah, cool, whack it in. Don't really know how newspapers and magazines work, but I'm imagining that's what happens. And so it's a little bit more time consuming, actually. So I guess on the flip side, if you as an individual can develop the or gain the trust of your readers or your audience, then not only are you going to be very successful, but you're also doing them a favour. And that's probably why people end up being fans of people, because they know they can trust, just like with musicians, artists, you can trust them to keep making good work, and each album, you know, will be at least of a certain standard, i.e. Frank Ocean releases an album, I'm gonna invest the time. And probably that's what overall, if I was to say why trust is important, it comes down to time. There are other things involved, like responsibility, reputation, there we go. If you trust someone's source and then you use it to form an opinion, or you form an opinion or write an article, and then it turns out that they were wrong, or they didn't put the effort into actually, I don't know, they messed up an experiment or research somehow for some silly reason, then your reputation is also going to suffer. But on the time basis, if you trust an artist, for example, then you will invest an hour of your time to go through each and every song and listen to it. Whereas there are certain artists where I will now, because I know that they probably get around three good songs on an album, I'll only listen to, you know, I'll pick them out and I'll maybe give them a bit of a skip through and see, does this appeal to me? And it's kind of sad, really, but it's just the nature of the world that we live in. We don't have a lot of time, so we do stick with the things we trust. And I could do a whole video on why that is actually slightly harmful in terms of, I guess, creativity for you as a person. If you're not being serendipitous, if you're not consuming things from sources that you don't trust usually, and therefore trying new things out, then you are just going to get stuck in a bit of a wheel, a cycle where you're just going round and round and not having new ideas. There's an interesting example on the Liverpool subreddit. So transfers, right? There's, over the course of the years of football, there's been so much bullshit during transfer season, which is like the summer, and then it's also January. There's a summer transfer window, winter transfer window, and essentially the problem is that there's just rumours and rumours and rumours and rumours and rumours. And some people, like me when I was a kid, I would just read the tabloids, the Mirror, not the Sun, because it's a shit piece of garbage paper. Really tore them down there, didn't I? It's just an abomination of an organisation. But the Mirror, the Daily Star, because they would have just rumours, and that's what I was in for. I didn't care whether it was true or not, but the excitement of the rumour was enough. But now it's a lot easier to find out which sources you can trust. On the Liverpool subreddit, there is a tier system that the community has created, where the journalists you can trust are tier 1, the ones that you can trust a little bit but they've made a few mistakes, tier 2, tier 3, so on, tier 5, and then tier never listen to these people are, you know, like the red rags, the tabloids. And that's really helpful, and in some way, separate from being a creator that has trusted yourself, or a scientist or researcher that's trusted yourself, you could probably make a career out of being someone who accumulates sources that can be trusted and points people in the direction of them. Sorry, I've had to stop a few times here. It can be a bit frustrating because as I get towards the end of the evening, my voice goes a little bit, goes croaky, and I have to clear my throat a bit, and I don't want to do that on camera because it's not nice. You could make a reputation for yourself as a source accumulator, someone who gathers all of the trustworthy sources in one place, and people do that, don't they? They connect businessmen or investors with companies, and that person in the middle is not only like a broker of the deal, but they're also saying, listen, I can vouch for this person, I can vouch for that person, and therefore they are dealing in trust entirely. One thing I'm still to think a little bit about, and I think they connect somewhere, is trust and taste. I guess probably the way that I would find the connection there is that if you become trusted as someone with good taste, then you therefore are more likely to get viewers, I don't know, or get people respecting you and therefore buying things that you sell, whatever. It's a bit cynical, but yeah, that is a valuable thing to become, and I think Naval talks about that a lot in his podcast, his big long How to Get Rich podcast. But an example of that would be Anthony Fantano. I really trust his music taste, therefore when he puts a video out and says, this is a great one, I'll go and listen to it. That simple. That's all it takes. And at the same time, I'm trying to think in any other regard, who is there? Tim Ferriss, his guests, generally picks great guests. So I will put the time into a podcast of Tim Ferriss's that I wouldn't do with many others, even if at the beginning I don't feel like I'm interested. I trust Tim's taste in information and communication, and I guess people enough that I believe that if he has someone on the podcast, then they're bound to have something interesting to say. Anyway, I'll leave it there because I've dipped all over the place a bit there, because I started off with the quote, that's why perhaps the most important skill of a skilled thinker is knowing when to trust. I guess because if you can't do your research, like I said, can't do all your own research, like I said, then when you decide what to think, you are really relying on other people to form the foundations of the thoughts that you have. And I think that probably is a big difference between the people that have very flawed thinking, because I think sometimes people who don't think very clearly, their gates are open a little bit too much and they trust too much, and they'll talk to you about, oh, did you see that this happened? And actually it turns out that didn't happen because it was just someone saying that it happened on Twitter. And oh my God, man, I hate things like election season, because I just have these memories of people saying, oh, did you see that this person said that and this person said that on Twitter all the time? Oh, I think when there's like big social uproar and stuff, the amount of videos and fake news that get posted is just it's mind-blowing. And that's, I think Tim Urban is actually trying to target that with this book. He talks a lot about levels of thinking and the levels of thinking that are harmful for you and for society, and the levels of thinking that are beneficial for society and for you. But I'll talk about this book in detail another time. In fact, it's going to keep fueling my thoughts, because it's just a very wide scope of a book that has a very wide scope. There we go, got there in the end. Gonna leave it there because I'm getting a bit wavy with my thoughts here. But yeah, I'll catch you tomorrow, and hopefully that has provoked your thinking a little bit and encouraged you to trust me a little bit more. And what I will say is, I will always remind you that whilst I like to think I know what I'm talking about, I don't know really, and I'm changing my opinion regularly, day to day. I think that is a good sign personally, because it shows that I'm updating my opinion whenever I get new information that I think disproves what I previously thought. And I think that's a good place to be, and also to be comfortable saying that you don't know about a subject and not becoming attached to your opinion when it may in fact be wrong. Truth is the thing that we have to aim for if we are going to have good lives personally, but have a society that functions where people are as happy as they can possibly be because they're nice to each other. Cool. Catch you later. Bye bye.